Computer, yes, we are on air. Okay, let me start over again. So we're going to introduce a little bit the topic of natural language semantics, in particular putting a lot of focus on the semantic relations between different sentences, and also about the general architecture of language, okay? So, right, so let's start with this thing called syntactic competence, that it's a capacity that we assume that we have because we are able to express grammaticality judgments or acceptability judgments. So we have these intuitions in our head that tell us that a sentence like the cop watched the spy with the binoculars is fine, is grammatical, whereas a sentence like the cop watched spy with the binoculars is horrible, right? Do you agree?
Yes.
Good. All right. So, what people said is that there is especially within the Chomskyan universal grammar minimalist framework, okay, that there is a correspondence between a linear set of words called phonological form and a deep hierarchical structure called logical form that is successfully linked with the semantic interpretation and structure thought, the language of thought, also called as LOT, okay? We are not going to adopt this specific framework, but this is just an example of how things can be thought of in formal linguistics. For instance, we're not going to really bother about the difference between language of thought and logical form. For us, logical form, as the term says in itself, it is something that is actually interpreted. So it is a formal representation of sentences that is ready to be semantically interpreted, or it is already interpreted by itself, by its nature. Okay. Whereas the phonological form, you can think of it as a sort of let's say a flat representation of words that then are assigned a syntactic structure. Okay, so you see there is already a little bit of confusion here, which really comes from, I mean, I don't want to say things that are going to appear on my YouTube channel, but yes, comes from the confusion in Noam's head. It's not a confusion, but his idea about language is that formal semantics and formal syntax are the same, basically. That the systematic rule of interpreting logically set of strings are actually part of the language proper of UG, right? Other people kind of diverge in this respect. We're not gonna be particularly picky about this, but this is a lot of room for thoughts, for even, if you want to read stuff about this or discuss this topic more, you're welcome. All right, so we know the speaker possesses a syntactic competence because we know that we can consciously access these grammatical judgments, right? Which sometimes are very, very sharp, like in this case, sometimes they're a little bit more shaky. Right, now, here's another interesting thing. So first of all, sorry, I have some Italian words in the slides because these were translated from an Italian version. So if you see some Italian words, please forgive me about this. So let's take this very famous sentence introduced by Chomsky, modified in this nice version. The cop has watched the spy with the binoculars, okay? Can you tell me something about this sentence already? Does it sound good to you? Is this a well-formed sentence?
Yes.
Okay. What does it mean for you?
It's ambiguous, isn't it?
Right. It's a little bit ambiguous, right?
Yeah. So it can mean that somebody the cop watched the spy via the binoculars, or the cop watched the spy who has binoculars.
Very well. So I will repeat what you said again, so that also while doing the slides, so that it's going to be clear to everyone, but this is exactly the point of this sentence, right? It is structurally ambiguous. Let's see why. You might have one structural representation of this sentence, which is like this. So the cop is the subject, right? It has done something. It has watched the spy, and the action of watching the spy, right, in this little v phrase, no, I'm already getting things wrong. Right, sorry. So since the binoculars, this prepositional phrase is attached to the little v sentence here, to the little v phrase, what happens that, no, I was right. Okay, sorry.
It's also, it's not little v, it's just VP, right?
Yeah. So yeah, probably this is, yeah. Anyways, you see that the PP with the binoculars is composing with the whole phrase of watching the spy, okay? So whether this is here or actually here, I don't know if this is the right position. The idea is that the act of watching the spy happens with the binoculars. So the PP is modifying the whole VP of watching the spy, okay? So the act of watching the spy is made with the binoculars, and that's fine. But you might have a representation like this, where you see that it's the spy that has the binoculars. So the PP modifier, the prepositional phrase, is directly modifying or directly composing with the spy. So the noun phrase spy is modified with the binocular. So it is the spy who is with the binocular, and then you compose it with the determiner, and then the act of watching by the cop is not, we don't know if he had binoculars or anything, right? So the binoculars are not modifying the act of watching, but what the spy has, right? So you see, these are two different syntactic structures, syntactic derivations that drive to different semantic interpretations, but your phonological form, your string of your set of strings, your surface structures, also as it has been called, is exactly the same. So the sentence that you read or that you hear is exactly the same, but it can be assigned these two different parses, right? Right. So, yeah. So I don't know if any of you speak Italian. I think someone from Trieste must speak Italian. So, right. So Italian is a fancy language because it has a the order is less fixed as compared to English. We can move, for instance, stuff by doing operations that are called like topicalizations, for instance, back and forth from the position that is usually referred to as the object position in the linear string to the subject position. So in Italian, a sentence like the cop watching the spy with binoculars can actually mean that the spy has watched the cop with the binoculars, okay? Especially if you say the cop has watched the spy with the binoculars, or the cop, the spy has watched with the binoculars, okay? So see, you have even one more parse. Now, this would not be the correct syntactic representation for this strange parse, but you might have some topic head or some, some topic phrase which index that this kind of special operation has been done. Okay. Right. So yeah. So but this would really be impossible even in Italian. So that the cop has watched the binoculars with the spy. Okay. Okay, it doesn't make any sense. But even if it made sense, you're not allowed to shift the argument of the prepositional phrase with the object, for instance, of the sentence. Okay, so you see there are some operations that are allowed in some languages, some operations that are not allowed in some languages, and some operations that are impossible in every language, which suggests us that there are some constraints, some syntactic constraints in all the possible parses that a sentence can generate. Do you see this? And do you agree with me?
Yes.
Good. Sorry, I can see your thumbs because I'm.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
How would the sentence work if it wasn't binoculars and spies? For example, the cop has watched the child with the mother. You could mix that up though, couldn't you?
I'm not sure I got your point.
Sure, but he just said that the
Mhm.
cop has watched the child with the mother, right? It's also ambiguous, right? Because either you have the watching, the cop watches together with the mother the child, or you have the cop watching the child with its mother.
Right. So you were just asking, what if we have a mother instead of the binoculars?
Exactly, because then you could put the mother in front of the child and it would not necessarily make the same sense, but it would still make sense as a sentence.
Can I say something? So
Sure.
So this sentence here, it's only about it being ambiguous because it's still grammatical, right? The cop has watched the binoculars with the spy. I mean, it's a correct sentence, right?
Yes.
It's just, it doesn't mean the same thing as the one that's before.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So this is good. So the syntactic ambiguity is not a problem for well-formedness, right? The problem is different. And the problem is that you don't know which one is the right part. So both parses could be good. Now the question about the mother was that, if I got it right, if we have with the mother, can the mother move from the argument of the PP to being the object? Was that your question?
Yes, basically.
Right. I don't think it can, right? If you say the teacher has talked to the child with the mother, right? Semantically speaking, what you're saying is that, yeah, you might understand that since he's talking to both of them, you can switch their role, right? But syntactically, it's not really the case. So that effect that you are alluding to is probably due to the fact that at the interpretational level, if you talk to someone with someone else, then you can sort of semantically switch the roles, right? But syntactically, that wouldn't be allowed, right?
Okay.
Do you guys agree with this? Okay.
I guess it makes sense.
Okay, thank you. All right. Yeah, but yeah, very, very good question. Very good point. Okay, so you see there are a lot of issues. Yeah. So, right. So we talked a little bit about our syntactic competence, but like, what about the semantic competence? Do we have anything that looks like a semantic competence, right? So the syntactic competence is about which derivations are allowed by grammar, right? And probably also which one you prefer, but that's not really about just competence, but that kind of already a mix between competence and performance, right? So in the original distinction by Chomsky, which is one I actually like, there are these two things. One is the competence that is governed by your UG, so your language faculty that you have in your head, and then there is the performance that is how you actually use language in real time, in the real communication. And Chomsky thinks that these two things are completely separated, that the study of theoretical syntax is really about the competence, and the performance is something that pollutes, in a way, the study of competence, or that can kind of deceive you into thinking that competence would work in a different way. Now, psycholinguists actually are also interested in performance. So they actually claim, if we simplify things a little bit, that in a way, the only thing you can see is performance. So it's very interesting to study performance. And it's very interesting to study how can you infer from issues about performance, so from the observed behavior, the syntactic competence and the issues about the competence. So the difference is that from saying, I don't really care about performance, we actually say, no, we do care about performance. It's really important also to study the link between these two things. And this is in a way one of the main topics of this class, okay? All right, so I already said that Chomsky was that guy twice. Yeah. But yeah, of course, you know, it's, I mean, nothing prevents you to say, I'm only interested in competence. I'm a super theoretical guy. I don't really care a lot about performance, okay? And you can do that, but this would be a different approach as to the one we're taking in this class. All right, so syntactic competence also tells you how to combine constituents together, right? To form phrases. And this it's called composition in general terms, can be called merge, you know, unification, you can call it however you want, but the concept is the same. You have the boy, you put them together and you create a DP, the boy, okay? And the boy has a different interpretation as interpretation of just the word the, which does not really mean a lot, or the word boy, which is just much more, let's say, undetermined, okay? So the question is, how does interpretation take place? You have your syntactic structures derived by your syntactic competence. Then what are you going to do with it, right? Semantics. So in semantics, we think that the LF is not just a structural representation, but it is the representation that is interpretable, basically. It's where we run our semantic computations, right? So are we able to make stable judgments on the way that two or more sentences are semantically linked or related to each other? This is the key question for formal semantics and for inferring whether we have a semantic competence. Well, some people say no. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so the meaning of word is fuzzy, is vague. Words has a lot of vagueness in them, has a lot of ambiguity. And every word, the interpretation of every word depends on the context of utterance. The speakers, what the speakers are thinking, what is the knowledge that the speakers share, extra linguistic concepts, and a lot of things that can mess up with the idea that we have some stable judgments, stable meaning judgments and semantic judgments about the meaning of the sentence, right? But then there are people that think, yes, that in spite of that, in spite of what we said here, which still holds, because no one would argue that words are ambiguous, in spite of that, there exists some semantic relations on which we are able to make stable judgments, to put our hands on the fire like Muzio Scevola, okay? And, you know, it's probably clear that we are going to take this other perspective, okay? So, in order to get closer to this, let's ask ourselves, what is semantics, right? What is semantics? The study of meaning of words, right? So, for instance, let's take again our parse, which now is in Italian. We know that we have binoculars, we know we have spy, we know we have cop. And we go to our brain, we go to the lexicon in our brain, probably in your temporal cortex, and we go there and we ask the lexicon, look, lexicon, what is binoculars, right? And our lexicon is going to tell us, oh, binoculars is an optical instrument with a lens for each eye used for viewing distant objects. Great. What is a spy? A spy is a person employed by government or organization to secretly obtain information of an enemy or a competitor. Awesome. What's a cop? Don't make stupid jokes. The cop is a police officer. Okay? Good. So if our semantics give us all these different meanings for all these lexical items that we have in the sentence, that arguably our phonology, morphology, syntax give us as the result of their computation, right? How can we account for the different interpretations of what's the spy with the binoculars? You see that there is a missing link, right? We have a structure, we have the lexical meanings. How can we pull these things together? You see the question? Sorry, I cannot see anything, so you have to speak aloud.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any idea about how to address this question?
There are cases.
Yeah. There are cases? Oh,
Yes, we have the accusative case, for example.
right. So you're saying, you know, there are information within the words that give us some hint about how things should be grouped and composed together, right?
Yes.
But then, you know, someone might say, yeah, but that's still syntax. That's still about creating the structure. So once you have your structure and you have your lexical meanings, the main thing you have to do is to compose them together, right? So to compose the meaning of these words together. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Good. Right. So here comes a more interesting definition of semantics. Semantics is not just a dictionary where you look up the meaning of single words, but it's also a study of the operations through which the meanings of single words are composed and integrated in those of complex expressions. Okay? I could give you some reference for this, but I have it in other slides. I would say Davidson, I mean, starting from Tarski, Frege, and also Davidson probably, right? So yeah, I can give you some references if you want to know something about the classics of this kind of thinking, which was actually quite recent, like the 20th century, basically, with the birth of logic and formal semantics, especially with Richard Montague, okay? All right, so compositional semantics, there we go. Sorry, this is in Italian. So yeah, so binocular is binocular, guardato means watched, spia spy, and poliziotto is cop. So this is also good for, so that you can learn some Italian, right? So compositional semantics tell us that if you have the spy and the binocular in the same clause, in the same small phrase, then you're going to combine them together and you're going to get the spy with the binocular. Then when you move up in a bottom-up fashion, you're going to compose the meaning of your spy with the binocular with, well, first with the determiner, la, which means the, and then with the verb, to watch. And then you have, at this level, the meaning of the VP, which is watching the spy that has a binocular. And then you're wondering, but yeah, but who's the agent of this action? Who's the subject? And then your cop comes about. So you see that at each level step of derivation, you can create a sort of a local interpretation, right? So at this level, all you have is that you have an individual, X, such that X is a spy, and X has binoculars. That's all you have. What you're going to do with that, you can do anything with that, but then when you get a VP, composing, especially in syntactic term, this is called C-commanding, right? So standing above and taking all that stuff as the argument, as this NP, right? Then what you get is that someone must be the agent of this verb, right? Someone has watched an individual, X, such as X is a spy, and X is as binocular. So you just take this and you apply on top of that the fact that there is an event of watching which requires an agent, because, you know, things cannot be watched by themselves, right? Unless you have certain issues. All right. And then if we go higher again in the structure, then we get to our subject. So it was a cop. So again, you take all this, right? And you might say, the cop is that someone who has watched an individual X such that X is spy and X is binocular. So here's compositional semantics. You start from the meaning of simple expressions, you compose them together, and then you create always more complex expressions interpreted in a recursive and compositional way. Why compositional? Because compositional is exactly this. You compose more simpler units to create more complex units, right? Always with the same mechanism, composition, and recursion, because you can do that over and over and over at the infinite level. Okay. Before finishing this class, I want to ask you: can you give me a nice example of a completely recursive structure in language that you can use to create possible infinite chain of compositions?
I will have to leave now. I'm sorry.
It's okay, don't worry. It's fine. The class is kind of over, so I'm gonna see you tomorrow at 2 for those who have to leave. Okay.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you. But for those who stay, in 1 minute, I would like to have this example. There is one particular structure that tell us that language is completely recursive. Anyone has an idea? Any wild guess? Don't worry.
The word and.
Sorry?
The word and. Like if you have a sentence and you add and.
That's a very good example, yes.
Or maybe or too. I think you can put or in any sentence and then
yes.
add
Logical
to it.
connectives, right?
Yes.
You can say, I went to the bar and I drank a beer and I saw my ex-girlfriend and I got very upset and I started crying and I drank 3 liters of wine and I was run over by a car, and go on forever, right? That's really good. Thank you very much. But there is another construction that I was thinking of where it's also probably even more clear, because with and you are just adding sentences to create a bigger sentence. But if you want to stay within the domain of one single sentence, what is that nice structure that we can use to have full-fledged illimited recursion?
Wouldn't that apply to adjectives? Because you can just add them.
That's also a very nice, very nice answer. So you can say, I saw the guy, I saw the red, white-haired, tall, funny, smiley, whatever guy, right?
Or relative sentences.
Say it again.
Relative sentences.
Yes, that's what I want to have. Which is kind of the same as, I mean, bears some very close resemblance to adjectival modification, right? But then you really see the recursive part, especially with down branching, with like right branching. So I saw a guy who had red hair, who was talking a lot, who was smelly, who was being run by a car, right? And you can go on forever. So there is also a famous Italian song which actually uses this, which talk about a fest where a guy who got a mouse, who was then drawn, who was bought, who was burned, and blah, 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 okay? It's called La Fiera dell'Est. Very nice song by Angelo Branduardi. Okay, so I guess I have to call it a day. So I'm gonna stay here. If some of you guys send some additional questions, I'll be here. Otherwise, see you tomorrow and we finish this presentation, and probably we are gonna also hear something from Mike, okay? And
I also just wanted to ask, are we
Please.
going to get those slides as well?
Yes, yes.
Are, okay.
I put them slides immediately on Moodle and also on Dropbox, and I will also put the other slides that I'm going to talk about next days.
Okay.
Okay. So we are doing a little bit of theoretical stuff now. Don't worry, we are going to leave purely theoretical issues very soon and dive into psycholinguistics. Okay. But you see, it's kind of important to have clear in mind what we're going to talk about and how these things work. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you. And again, if someone has any other question, I'm going to be here for a few minutes. Otherwise, have an
You
idea.
can stop recording.
Stop the recording.
Hi,
Yeah, sorry.
do you hear me?
Yes.